Hello everyone, so today we're going to be doing another try-a-volume video. This time I'm going to be talking about these 7 new manga releases. I just realized they're all upside down, but it's okay. This time I have a good mix of things. Some I was very much looking forward to, some I had not even heard of before I saw them on the shelves at the store. And of course, they were a mix of quality as well, so let me go ahead and share my thoughts with you, starting with the first one I read, Auto. So this is a science fiction manga. It opens up with this boy here. He pretty much almost gets hit by a truck in typical anime manga fashion, but he is saved by a young woman. We soon learn that he has been a victim of scientific testing, so that's why he has this weird plant arm here. He has escaped from the facility he was being held at, and he's now on the run. Meanwhile, the government is trying to capture him again. Of course, not anything that I haven't read before, but this one was a very fun, action-packed first volume. We can see very obvious Akira influences, especially in the art. I really like the kind of juxtaposition between Eito's plant powers and this really dense city where it's taking place in. The city is bustling and has completely left nature behind. So the fact that he is like the epitome of human progress because he is a result of scientific testing, but he has these plant powers that just go so far against the human progress in the city is really interesting. The action scenes are really cool, especially at the end. It gets pretty intense, and there's some interesting tensions in the background that I'm sure we'll learn more about in the future. But this was a super strong start in this group of manga. I'm very excited that I read this. This is one that I had not heard of. I had not seen the cover ever, which is very rare. Usually I'm pretty up to date with the manga that are being released, but I just saw this on the shelf at Barnes & Noble and was immediately hooked by the cover, so I went ahead and picked it up. At this point, I've heard some more people picking it up and enjoying it, but at the time, I had not heard anything about it. So this was a really great first volume, one of the strongest ones from this group. The next volume one I read was My Name is Shingo. This is a manga by Kazuo Umezu. It's not really a horror manga like his other works, at least so far. This is another science fiction manga. This one is focusing on this robot who seems to be just a regular factory machine, but it has a conscience and an identity, and it kind of narrates a portion of the story. But we do open with this kid right here. His father works in the factory where this robot has been installed. I hesitate to call it a robot at this point. It's basically just a factory machine, but he has heard that there's a robot in his father's factory and he really wants to meet it. So the first half of this volume, I think some people would find incredibly boring. Actually, the entire volume, many people would find boring, and I know that because I read the Goodreads reviews and many people called it boring, especially in the beginning where it's basically just this boy just so excited to see the robot. It's just panel after panel of him being super excited, like stars in his eyes, to see this robot. And I'm sure some people would find that boring, but this manga was made for me. I've said this a million times before, and I'll say it again. I love robots, and any manga or story or anything that explores their potential sentience, whether they're evil, whether they're more human. We also have, of course, this interesting discussion of industrialization because his father fears that his job is going to be taken away because they are installing robots in the factory. What's interesting to me about this manga is I was kind of expecting the robot to look more like a typical, like, anthropomorphic humanoid robot, but it doesn't. It just looks like a regular machine that you would see in a factory. It has a name because the other factory workers have given it a name, but interestingly, that name is not Shingo. So that's going to be something we explore more in the future. And we know it's sentient because, like I said, it does narrate parts of the story. There are panels where we see the two main character kids from the robot's point of view. I also really want to point out the galaxy imagery used in this volume. It's really the most prominent at the beginning and the end. So here we have, obviously, this kind of galaxy picture, but then there are some points where the galaxy kind of melds into the robotics of the robot, the computer parts, and it's kind of a reflection of its consciousness and life, I guess, and that is so interesting to me. So, like I said, this manga was made for me. When I say that I love stories about robots, this is exactly what I mean. Not a lot happens in this volume, but we do see the robot learning things, thinking, and it just seems to be setting up a later conflict. So this is obviously not going to be for everyone. I can tell from the reviews that many people do not like this, and it's not quite like Kazuo Umeza's other works, but I will, of course, be continuing to buy this because I loved it. Definitely looking forward to more. This was probably my favorite volume in this group, but there are some other ones that are very good that are coming up as well. The next volume one I read was The Blue Wolves of Mibu. I'll try to show you so it doesn't get too glary, but this is about this kid here. He is an orphan. He was basically taken in by this old woman along with another girl, and they work in her restaurant. Through various circumstances, he meets a few members of the Shinsengumi, although at this point they're not called that, and he joins them in order to realize his goals for justice and to change the world for the better, hopefully. So that's it. I don't have a lot to say about this volume. I don't think it actually did anything wrong. I wasn't bored while reading it. I didn't hate the characters or anything, but I also didn't love anything about it. I just read it and it was fine. There are, of course, many other manga that explore these historical figures, whether they're really silly, like Golden Kamuy, or other stories that address them more seriously, and honestly, I'd rather read all of those instead of this. Again, it didn't do anything wrong. It just didn't do anything that would make me want to read another volume of this. And I would say it is a little bit preachy at times just because they're talking so much about how they want to change the world for the better and they're really looking forward to justice. But yeah, I am trying to be more picky about the manga I pick up, and this one just didn't do enough for me to want to pick up a second volume or keep reading. I have heard it gets pretty good, but at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and drop it here. The next volume one I read was Gachiakuta. This is about another orphan boy. This one lives in kind of the slums. He's really an outcast. The slums are next to this huge pit that everyone throws their garbage into. One day he is falsely accused of murder, and he too is thrown into the pit with the rest of the garbage. But the pit is not quite what it seems, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So this was a really fun first volume, another really action-packed one. It's a little bit darker in terms of art, but I didn't find the action scenes difficult to follow at all. The world building is already pretty interesting in here with the pit, and there's some different classes or different groups of people and the different power dynamics happening there. And there's also some fantasy / magical elements and some mystery as well. I'm not sure if this is going to be anything deeper than just a fun action story, but I am interested in reading more. I know there's quite a bit of chapters on the K-Manga app, I believe, so I might read ahead on there to see if I want to pick up a bunch more volumes, but I am hooked. I did really like the world building, and I am interested in reading more of this one. Next, I read a slice of life manga. This is God Bless the Mistaken, Volume 1. I will say the only reason I picked this up is because it is by the author of Bloom Into You, which is a really, really great series. It has nothing to do with Bloom Into You. It's not similar in any way, but this one is another one with sci-fi elements. Here we have this world where random kind of glitches happen. They call them bugs, but it's basically a strange, unexplained phenomenon that affects reality, affects people. For example, one day they wake up with plants sprouting everywhere, places they aren't supposed to be growing, or sometimes people are suddenly able to walk on air. We have our main character here. He is in middle school and he lives in this kind of share house with some other people, and it basically just follows him exploring these different bugs. He also has a landlady, and she seems to know some more about these bugs than most people. She's a little bit mysterious. She also is not affected by the bugs. I thought this was interesting because I feel like this could very easily be something darker than it is. I mean, if you have this thing that affects reality that makes it so people can walk on air, then surely if that suddenly goes away and the next bug takes place, then some people would get hurt, but it never goes in that direction. And I wouldn't say I'm disappointed by that. This is very much a slice of life manga. I do want to learn more about our main character here because he is pretty young to be living by himself or with other people who aren't in his family. It's also pretty episodic, but I felt like the pacing was good, so that didn't bother me. So this is one of those series where obviously I don't need to be reading like 10 volumes at once, but it's nice to just pick up a volume every now and then. So I will be continuing this. Not the best volume from this group of manga, but it did enough for me to want to pick up the next volume. The next volume one I read is The Tree of Death, Yomotsuhegui. I think that's how you say that. So this is about our main guy right here. He is a former cop. He went to prison because he basically revenge killed the person who killed his wife and daughter. At the beginning of the story, he is now on parole, and he basically goes out to kill the other person who was involved in that crime, but he finds out that that guy is immortal, and also he's immortal. That's all I'm going to say about that. Hopefully that was enough to hook you. This was a really, really good volume. The art in here is amazing. I really wish this was released in like a deluxe edition or even just a larger trim size. This is just the typical 7Cs size volume. I really wish it was bigger so I could appreciate the art. The art kind of reminded me of Hellsing. Hopefully that comparison doesn't seem like out of nowhere, but I really felt like I would have appreciated seeing it in a bigger format like Hellsing is in the deluxe editions. As I was reading this, especially when he is in prison, I went, man, this really looks like Rainbow, the anime. I know there's a manga as well, but I watched part of the anime a long, long time ago, and I was reading this, and I'm like, man, this really looks like Rainbow, or the prison uniforms really look like Rainbow, and then I come to find out that this author is the author of the Rainbow manga. That doesn't matter for my opinion of this volume, but I thought it was kind of funny. I'm going to go ahead and say this was the darkest volume out of all the ones I read. For the series, definitely needs some trigger warnings. It's pretty edgy and not in like a fun, lighthearted way, like it's really dark. But I was completely hooked after the first chapter. The art is amazing. It got pretty creepy, which you know I love. And I was 100% ready for this to be a long-running series with our main character and his companion, who I'm not going to talk about, going out and hunting these immortals. But it turns out this is only going to be a 3-volume series. I'm not sure if it got canceled or that was the intended length of the series. Either way, I'm going to read the next 2 volumes, of course. This was so good. It kind of hit that horror niche that I'm almost always looking for. And yeah, definitely a really good first volume. Obviously not going to be for everybody with the trigger warnings it needs, but I'm definitely looking forward to the continuation of this series. And the last volume one I read for this group of manga is Medalist. So this follows this character here. He is a former figure skater. He didn't really get what he wanted out of his profession, but he meets this girl here. She is 11 years old, and she is really, really wanting to be a figure skater. But through various circumstances, she's basically not allowed to. Her mother is not supportive of her whatsoever. She's also pretty old to start. Usually, if you want to be a professional figure skater, you have to start at like 5 or 6 years old, and she's 11, like I said. But because of this, he decides that he is going to get back into the skating profession, this time as a coach, or her coach specifically. So this was a pretty fun first volume. As we know, I really love sports manga. This one is a little bit different from the typical sports manga I enjoy because it is just individual competitions. It's not team-based, at least I don't think it will be. Also, something else I noticed is that every character in here is mean, or almost every character in here is mean, especially the moms. The moms are very mean. All the little kids are super mean. The little kids I can kind of understand because sometimes little kids are mean, but the moms felt kind of like dance moms, like they were really mean as well. That didn't affect my enjoyment of this manga, but I thought it was kind of funny. I think the highlight of this manga is the humor. It is pretty funny. At first I was a little afraid because it was doing some jokes that I didn't think they were funny. They weren't offensive or anything, I just thought they weren't funny. But as we get through to the second half of the manga, I started laughing a bit more. The protagonists as well are a strength of the series. These two you're already rooting for at the very beginning of the manga. I can't remember their names, but I like how he is given kind of a second chance to get back into his career, although he is not the one skating. I will say though, a weakness of this manga is definitely the art. When we have like color pages, it looks nice, but a lot of the time it gets pretty sketchy and not very detailed, so I wouldn't say it's a bad art, but it's definitely not a strength of the series. At least not in this first volume. I've read many, many manga where the first volume art is not good, but it improves very quickly, so that might happen with this manga, I'm not sure. And yeah, so like I said, a little bit different from the typical sports manga I enjoy, and the main character is also a lot younger than the typical high school sports manga that I read, but I am interested in reading more. So now I'm going to rank them, not necessarily by the rating I gave the volume, but by how interested I am in picking up the next volume. So in last place, we have The Blue Wolves of Mibu. Not necessarily a bad volume, just didn't do anything that would make me want to read the next one. So that is in last place. Next, we have God Bless the Mistaken. just because it's a slice of life manga, which is not my favorite genre. So I'm not going to be as interested in picking up the next volume of this as opposed to some of the other sci-fi, horror, action things. These next two are really close, but I think this is the way I'm going to put it. Next is Medalist. Didn't do anything huge to hook me, but I am interested in reading more. And then we have Gachiakuta, which was good, but just didn't quite compare to the other volumes on this list. These last three were very, very difficult to rank. They're all very close, but next I'm going to go with Auto. Like I said, very, very interested in reading more. This was so action-packed, but just because of the nature of the last two, this one has to go here. That one was the most surprising though, because like I said, I had not heard of it at all when I picked it up at the store. Next is the most difficult decision I had to make, but again, this is ranking on how much I want to read the next volume, how much it intrigued me, not necessarily the rating I gave it. So, number 2 is My Name is Shingo. Again, this manga was made for me, not necessarily everybody else. This is not one I can go, oh, everybody should read this, because not everybody should read it. Some people will think it's very boring, but this manga was made for me. So it's going in the number 2 spot. And the number 1 manga on this list, the one I am most interested in continuing to read, is The Tree of Death, Yomotsuhegui. Especially since I know it's only going to be 3 volumes. I would have loved a really long series following these characters in this situation, but since I know it's only going to be 3 volumes, I'm very interested in seeing how it wraps everything up. If it gets any creepier, what other immortal things are going to happen in the next volume. So very interested in this. So here is my ranking. If you've read any of these volumes, please let me know what you thought of them. If you agreed with me, if you disagreed with me, I'd be very happy to read those comments down below. But that's going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!